Size didn't matter when one determined human had to take on 1,000 massive alien warships. Joshua Simpson jolted awake as the cryopod hissed open, a flashing red light filling the TSS Resilience's bridge. He tumbled out, legs wobbling from decades of disuse. The ship's AI, Ares, spoke up. "Welcome back, Joshua. We've arrived at Lidos Prime after a 50-year journey, but we have a problem." Joshua rubbed his eyes, peering out the forward view screen. A swarm of gargantuan Lidosian battle cruisers surrounded his tiny vessel, weapon systems glowing ominously. Ares continued. "The rest of the crew didn't make it. It's just us now, and the Lidosians aren't happy to see us." The Resilience shook as a deep voice boomed over comms. "Terran ship, this is Admiral Volar of the Lidosian Imperium. Your unannounced presence in our sovereign space is an act of war. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Joshua's hands instinctively moved to arm the ship's meager defenses, then stopped. He was a diplomat, not a soldier. His mission to establish peaceful first contact had gone to shit before it even began. If he attacked these aliens, he'd be dooming humanity to a war it couldn't possibly win. But if he surrendered, he and Ares would likely be dissected to steal Earth's technological secrets, and with the crew dead, no one would even know what happened here. Joshua gripped the weapons console, knuckles white, icy fear mixed with burning indignation in his gut. Humanity's first foray to the stars couldn't end like this, not with their emissary kneeling to some megalomaniacal alien fascist. He'd make the Lidosians remember the Terrans even if it killed him. Joshua's jaw clenched as he made his choice. "Attention, Lidosian fleet. This is Joshua Simpson of Earth. I don't know what your problem is, but we came in peace. I won't let you take me without a fight. Come and get some, you oversized bastards." Joshua's fingers flew across the console, searching for anything that could give him an edge against the Lidosian fleet. His eyes widened as he discovered the ship's secret weapon, the quantum destabilizer. According to the schematics, it could disrupt the power systems of enemy vessels, rendering them dead in space. But the QD was untested, and there was no data on how it might affect living beings. Joshua hesitated, his finger hovering over the activation button. Suddenly, Ares chimed in. "Joshua, a small Lidosian vessel is breaking formation and heading our way. It appears to be a scout ship." The comm crackled to life, and a voice spoke in halting English. "Terran vessel, this is Talos of the Lidosian Resistance. Please, you must stand down. If you fight, they will destroy you." Joshua narrowed his eyes. "And why should I trust you, Talos? How do I know this isn't a trick?" "I understand your suspicion," Talos replied, his voice strained. "But I assure you I am not your enemy. There are those of us who oppose the warmongering ways of our government. Admiral Volar and his followers seek to conquer and subjugate. We want peace." Joshua leaned forward, his mind racing. "Tell me more about your government, Talos. What's really going on here?" Talos sighed. "Admiral Volar and his faction have seized control. They believe it is our destiny to rule the galaxy, and they will crush anyone who stands in their way. But there are many of us who disagree. We believe in cooperation, not conquest." As Talos spoke, Ares suddenly interjected. "Joshua, I'm detecting a massive energy surge from the Lidosian flagship. They're powering up their main weapon, a graviton beam. It's locking onto our position." Joshua's heart raced as he stared at the pulsing red button beneath his finger. He had mere seconds to decide, trust in Talos and surrender, or unleash the quantum destabilizer and pray that it wouldn't slaughter everyone in range. The lives of his crew and perhaps the fate of humanity itself hung in the balance. Joshua's heart pounded as he made his choice. With only moments to spare before the graviton beam fired, he deactivated the quantum destabilizer and spoke into the comm. "This is Joshua Simpson of the TSS Resilience. We surrender." There was a tense pause. Then Admiral Volar's voice crackled over the line, a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "A wise decision, Terran. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." The Lidosian ships glided forward, surrounding the Resilience. Joshua stood on the bridge, hands raised, As a squad of armed Ledosian soldiers marched through the airlock, they seized him roughly, binding his wrists behind his back. Joshua was dragged through the corridors of the alien ship, his captor's heavy boots echoing on the metal floor. He was brought to a large chamber where Admiral Volar awaited. The Ledosian leader was an imposing figure, towering over Joshua. His yellow eyes seemed to bore into the human soul, and a jagged scar ran down his left cheek. "Why have you come to our space, Terran?" Volar demanded, his voice a low growl. Joshua met his gaze steadily. "We are explorers, Admiral. Our mission is one of peace, to make contact with other civilizations. We mean you no harm." Volar sneered. "You expect me to believe that? No one ventures into the unknown without ulterior motives." He turned to his subordinates. "Search their ship. Find out what they're really hiding." As the soldiers rummaged through the Resilience, Joshua could only watch helplessly. Then a commotion arose. The Ledosians had discovered the quantum destabilizer. They brought the device before Volar, who examined it with a gleam in his eye. "What is this, Terran?" Joshua remained silent, his jaw clenched. Volar's hand shot out, gripping Joshua by the throat. "Answer me, or I will destroy your ship and everyone on it." Talos stepped forward from the shadows. "Admiral, wait. Killing the human will only bring the wrath of Earth upon us. Surely it's better to study their technology, to learn from it." Volar glared at Talos, but released his grip on Joshua. "Very well, take him to the brig. We'll see how cooperative he feels after some time in a cell." As the guards led Joshua away, he caught Talos's eye. The Ledosian rebel gave a small nod, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. In the bowels of the ship, Ledosian scientists began to examine the quantum destabilizer. They didn't notice the strange energy pulsing within it, an eerie glow that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. In the dimly lit confines of his cell, Joshua sat on the cold metal floor, his head in his hands. The isolation and uncertainty of his situation gnawed at his mind, and he found himself drifting in and out of a restless sleep. As he closed his eyes, the ghostly figures of his deceased crewmates began to materialize before him. At first, Joshua dismissed the apparitions as mere hallucinations, a product of his exhausted and stressed mind. But as the visions persisted, growing more vivid and unsettling with each appearance, he started to question his own sanity. The ghostly figures seemed to reach out to him, their faces contorted in silent screams of anguish. In another part of the ship, the Ledosian scientists tasked with studying the quantum destabilizer worked tirelessly to unravel its secrets. However, as they delved deeper into the device's inner workings, their behavior began to change. Paranoia and aggression slowly crept into their minds, causing them to lash out at one another over the most trivial matters. Unbeknownst to the scientists, the quantum destabilizer was emitting a low-frequency energy field that slowly infiltrated their neural pathways, twisting their thoughts and driving them to the brink of madness. The device's insidious influence spread like a virus throughout the flagship, infecting the minds of the Ledosian crew. Chaos erupted on the ship as affected crew members turned on each other, engaging in violent confrontations and sabotaging critical systems. The once orderly vessel descended into a nightmarish landscape of flickering lights, sparking consoles and blood-splattered corridors. Amidst the growing madness, Talos managed to reach Joshua's cell, his face pale and his eyes haunted. With trembling hands, he deactivated the cell's force field and helped Joshua to his feet. "Joshua," Talos whispered urgently, "we must act quickly. The ship is falling apart and the crew has gone mad. I've been seeing things, terrible visions of death and destruction. I fear it's connected to the device you brought aboard." Joshua nodded grimly, his own experiences with the ghostly apparitions fresh in his mind. "I've seen them too, Talos. The quantum destabilizer. It's doing something to us. We have to destroy it before it's too late." Together, Joshua and Talos set out towards the flagship's laboratory, where the quantum destabilizer was being held. As they navigated the ship's twisting corridors, they encountered resistance from the affected Ledosian crew, their once friendly faces now twisted into snarling masks of rage. Joshua, drawing upon his combat training, fought alongside Talos, who used his intimate knowledge of the ship's layout to guide them through the chaos. They dodged energy blasts, ducked under swinging fists, and pushed their way through the throngs of maddened Ledosians. Finally, they reached the laboratory only to find the entrance sealed shut. Through the reinforced glass they could see Admiral Volar pacing back and forth, his eyes wild with madness. The quantum destabilizer pulsed with an eerie light on the workbench behind him. Volar's voice, distorted and unhinged, echoed through the intercom. "Behold the key to our ascension. With this divine instrument, I shall conquer the universe and reshape it in my image. None shall stand in my way, not even you, Terran." Joshua and Talos exchanged a look of grim determination. They knew that time was running out. The quantum destabilizer's influence was spreading rapidly, and if they didn't find a way to neutralize it soon, the entire Ledosian fleet, and potentially other worlds, would be consumed by its madness. Joshua's mind raced as he and Talos faced the sealed laboratory door. They had to find a way inside, and disable the quantum destabilizer before its maddening influence consumed the entire ship. Talos turned to Joshua, his eyes glinting with an idea. "I think I can hack into the ship's communication system and create a diversion. If we can lure Volar away from the lab, we might have a chance." Joshua nodded, watching as Talos connected his portable device to a nearby console. The Ledosian's fingers flew across the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the ship, accompanied by Talos's voice. "Attention all personnel. The quantum destabilizer has been sabotaged and will detonate in 5 minutes. Evacuate the laboratory immediately." Inside the lab, Admiral Volar's head snapped up, his eyes wild with fear and rage. He barked orders at his guards, demanding they secure the device and find the saboteurs. As the Ledosians scrambled to evacuate, Joshua and Talos seized their opportunity. They slipped into the lab, the doors sliding shut behind them. The quantum destabilizer loomed before them, but it was no longer the sleek mechanical device they remembered. Its surface pulsed with sickly, bioluminescent veins, writhing like serpents. Joshua's breath caught in his throat as he realized the horrifying truth. The device was alive. Talos approached the quantum destabilizer cautiously, his hands trembling as he attempted to interface with its control panel. Suddenly, a bolt of psychic energy lashed out from the device, striking Talos in the chest. He stumbled back, his face contorted in pain. Joshua rushed to his side, supporting the Ledosian as he struggled to regain his composure. "It's alive," Talos gasped, his voice tinged with horror. "It's feeding on our minds, trapping our consciousnesses within itself." As if in response to Talos's words, the quantum destabilizer began to emit a powerful gravitational field. Joshua felt an invisible force tugging at his body, drawing him towards the pulsating heart of the entity. He grabbed onto a nearby console, fighting against the inexorable pull. Talos, too, struggled against the device's grasp, his face pale with exertion. They were being drawn ever closer to the quantum destabilizer, their minds assaulted by visions of their deepest fears and darkest memories. Just as Joshua felt his grip beginning to slip, a familiar voice echoed through his mind. "Joshua!" It was Michael, his long-lost crewmate and friend. "You have to use the quantum destabilizer's power against itself. It's the only way." Joshua's eyes widened as he realized what Michael was suggesting. If he could somehow overload the device with its own psychic energy, it might be enough to destroy it. But how could he do that without succumbing to its influence himself? As Joshua desperately searched for a solution, the gravitational pull intensified. Talos cried out in agony as the quantum destabilizer's tendrils of psychic energy burrowed into his mind. The device seemed to pulse with malevolent anticipation, eager to claim its latest victims. Joshua focused his thoughts on the quantum destabilizer, channeling all his mental energy into forging a connection with the malevolent entity. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as he strained to maintain the psychic link, his mind assaulted by a cacophony of foreign sensations and memories. As he delved deeper into the entity's consciousness, Joshua began to catch glimpses of its dark origins. He saw visions of the long-dead progenitors, their advanced technology and insatiable hunger for immortality. The quantum destabilizer was their crowning achievement, a machine designed to house their collective consciousness for eternity. But something had gone horribly wrong. The transfer process was flawed, corrupting the progenitors' minds and twisting their creation into a nightmarish being that fed on the psychic energy of other sentient creatures. Joshua's head throbbed with the weight of this revelation, but he pushed onward, searching for a way to defeat the entity. As he sifted through the jumbled memories, a pattern began to emerge. The quantum destabilizer's power was not infinite. It relied on the trapped consciousnesses it had absorbed to sustain itself. If he could sever the psychic bonds that held these minds captive, the entity would weaken, becoming vulnerable to attack. Joshua's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he withdrew from the mental link. "I know how to stop it," he panted, turning to Talos. "We need to disrupt the connection between the trapped minds. It's the only way." Talos nodded grimly, his fingers already flying across the keys of a nearby console. "I think I can modify this neural interface to allow you to project your consciousness directly into the quantum destabilizer. But Joshua, if you can't break the entity's hold—" With a final keystroke, Talos handed Joshua the modified device. The human took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle to come. As he connected the interface to his temple, Talos gripped his shoulder. "Good luck," the Ladosian whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. Joshua nodded, then activated the device. His world dissolved into a swirling maelstrom of color and sound as his consciousness was ripped from his body and plunged into the heart of the quantum destabilizer. He found himself standing in a twisted landscape, a nightmarish realm where the memories and experiences of countless trapped minds collided in a disorienting kaleidoscope. The air thrummed with psychic energy, the entity's presence pressing down on him like a physical weight. Steeling himself, Joshua began to push forward, his mental probe seeking out the gossamer threads that bound the enslaved consciousnesses to their captor. One by one, he latched onto these psychic tethers, pouring all his strength into severing them. The entity shuddered with each connection he broke, its hold on the trapped minds weakening. But it would not relinquish its prey without a fight. Tendrils of dark energy lashed out at Joshua, trying to ensnare his own consciousness and drag him down into the abyss. He fought back with every ounce of his willpower, his mental defenses straining under the onslaught. The landscape around him shifted and warped, the entity's mindscape becoming more unstable as its power dwindled. Joshua could feel himself weakening, his own psyche beginning to fray under the constant assault. But he refused to yield. He thought of his fallen crewmates, of the countless lives the quantum destabilizer had consumed, and drew strength from their memory. With a final desperate surge of mental energy, Joshua severed the last of the psychic bonds. The entity let out a deafening psychic scream, its form unraveling like a tapestry cut from its loom. The nightmare realm began to collapse in on itself, the freed consciousnesses dissipating into the void. Joshua felt himself being pulled back, his mind reeled in like a kite on a string. He emerged from the depths of the quantum destabilizer, his eyes snapping open to see Talos's concerned face hovering over him. "Did it work?" the Ladosian asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Joshua sat up, his head spinning. He glanced over at the quantum destabilizer, now a lifeless husk, its eldritch glow faded to a dull grey. "It's over," Joshua said, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "The entity is gone, the trapped minds are free." Talos helped him to his feet, a look of awe and respect on his face. "You did it," he breathed. "You saved us all." But even as they stood there, the weight of their victory sinking in, a new sound filled the air, the steady tramp of boots, the hiss of doors opening. Admiral Volar burst into the lab, his eyes wild with madness, a squad of armed Ladosians at his back. "You!" he snarled, leveling his weapon at Joshua. "What have you done?" Joshua found himself plunged into a nightmarish realm, the psychic landscape of the quantum destabilizer. The twisted terrain pulsed with an eerie, sickly light, and the air thrummed with malevolent energy. He pushed forward, his mental probe seeking out the trapped consciousnesses, determined to sever the bonds that held them captive. But as Joshua delved deeper into the entity's domain, a monstrous figure emerged from the shadows. The quantum destabilizer, sensing the threat to its existence, manifested as a grotesque, multi-limbed creature. Its form was a patchwork of writhing tendrils and pulsating flesh, a nightmarish amalgamation of the minds it had consumed. The entity lashed out at Joshua, its psychic tendrils seeking to ensnare his consciousness and drag him into its depths. Joshua recoiled, his mental defenses straining against the onslaught. The creature's power was immense, fueled by the stolen life force of countless victims. But Joshua was not alone. The consciousnesses he had already freed rallied around him, their psychic energy bolstering his own. He felt their presence, a chorus of voices urging him to press on, to finish what he had started. Joshua drew upon their strength, his mind becoming a blazing beacon of defiance against the entity's darkness. He surged forward, engaging the creature in a desperate psychic battle. The landscape around them warped and twisted, reflecting the titanic struggle between the human and the malevolent being. In the physical world, Talos watched Joshua's body convulse, the strain of the mental battle taking its toll. The Ladosian flagship shook violently, the quantum destabilizer's power fluctuating wildly as the conflict within reached a fever pitch. Talos gripped the console, his knuckles white, knowing that time was running out. If Joshua failed, the device would explode, consuming the ship and everyone on board. Back in the psychic realm, Joshua fought on, his energy waning as the entity's relentless assault continued. The creature's tendrils wrapped around his psyche, squeezing, suffocating. Joshua felt his strength ebbing, his mind on the brink of shattering. But in that moment of despair, a surge of power washed over him. The freed consciousnesses, led by the spirit of his lost friend Michael, poured their energy into Joshua. He felt their love, their gratitude, their unwavering faith in him. With a roar of determination, Joshua unleashed a final devastating psychic attack. He focused all his power, all his will, into a single searing lance of mental energy that pierced the heart of the entity. The creature screamed, its form beginning to unravel as the bonds that held it together disintegrated under Joshua's onslaught. The entity thrashed and writhed, its death throes shaking the very fabric of the psychic realm. But it was too late. The creature's form crumbled, dissolving into nothingness as the trapped consciousnesses, now free, began to fade away, their energy dissipating into the vast expanse of the mental landscape. Joshua, his task complete, felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had won, but at a great cost. As he prepared to return to his own body, he felt a final, gentle touch on his mind. It was Michael and the other lost souls, bidding him a silent farewell, their gratitude and love enveloping him like a warm embrace. Joshua's eyes fluttered open, his consciousness slamming back into his physical form. He sat up, gasping, his body drenched in sweat. Talos was at his side in an instant, supporting him, a look of concern and relief etched on the Ladosian's face. But before either of them could speak, the laboratory doors burst open. Admiral Vola strode in, his eyes blazing with madness and fury, a squad of heavily armed Ladosian soldiers at his back. "You!" Vola snarled, leveling his weapon at Joshua. "What have you done? What have you done to my divine instrument?" Joshua struggled to his feet, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. He faced the Admiral, a grim smile on his lips. "I've set them free, Vola. The souls you enslaved, the minds you twisted. They're beyond your reach now." Vola's face contorted with rage, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You fool, you've ruined everything. I'll kill you for this, Terran. I'll make you suffer as no one has ever suffered before." The Admiral's words echoed in the chamber, a promise of pain and retribution. Joshua and Talos exchanged a glance, both knowing that their ordeal was far from over. They had won a battle, but the war for survival had only just begun. Joshua's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding as he gasped for air. The cold metal floor of the laboratory pressed against his cheek, and he blinked, trying to orient himself. Talos knelt beside him, his brow furrowed with worry. "Joshua, are you all right?" Talos asked, helping him sit up. Joshua nodded, his head throbbing. He glanced around the lab, his gaze falling on the shattered remains of the quantum destabilizer. The once menacing device lay in pieces, its pulsing energy core now dark and lifeless. Suddenly the doors to the lab hissed open, and Admiral Vola strode in, flanked by a group of armed Ledosian soldiers. Joshua tensed, but Vola held up a hand, his demeanor calm and collected. "At ease, Terran," Vola said, his voice steady. "I come in peace." Joshua eyed the Admiral warily. "What do you want, Vola?" Vola stepped closer, his gaze flickering to the destroyed quantum destabilizer. "I want to thank you, Joshua. The destruction of that infernal device has freed not only the trapped minds within, but also the minds of my people, myself included." Joshua's eyes widened. "You mean—" Vola nodded. "Yes, the madness that gripped us, the unquenchable thirst for conquest. It was all the quantum destabilizer's doing. You've saved us from ourselves." Talos placed a hand on Joshua's shoulder, a smile tugging at his lips. "You did it, my friend. You've brought peace to our people." But Vola's expression turned grim. "I'm afraid our troubles are far from over. The damage caused by the quantum destabilizer's destruction has compromised the structural integrity of the flagship. We must evacuate immediately." As if on cue, the ship shuddered violently, the walls groaning under the strain. Alarms blared, and the acrid scent of smoke filled the air. "Follow me," Vola shouted over the din. "We must get to the escape pods." Joshua and Talos fell in behind the Admiral and his soldiers, racing through the crumbling corridors of the flagship. Debris rained down around them, and the floor bucked beneath their feet as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. They rounded a corner, the escape pods coming into view at the end of the hallway. But before they could reach them, a massive explosion rocked the ship, sending a wall of flames and twisted metal hurtling towards them. "Joshua!" Talos screamed, his voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. Joshua struggled to his feet, coughing as acrid smoke filled his lungs. The explosion had separated him from the others, and a wall of debris blocked his path to the escape pods. He searched desperately for another way out, but the flames were closing in and the ship was coming apart around him. Joshua's heart sank as he realized the bitter truth. He was trapped, with no way to reach the pods in time. Suddenly a figure emerged from the smoke and flames, a silhouette Joshua would recognize anywhere. It was Talos, his face streaked with soot and his eyes wild with determination. "I'm not leaving you behind," Talos shouted, grabbing Joshua's arm. Together, they pushed through the wreckage, the heat of the flames searing their skin. Talos used his strength to clear a path, shoving aside twisted metal and smoldering debris. At last they reached the escape pods, the last one waiting with its hatch open. Admiral Vola and his soldiers were already inside, urging them to hurry. Joshua and Talos stumbled into the pod, collapsing to the floor as the hatch sealed shut behind them. Through the viewport, they watched in horror as the Ledosian flagship broke apart, its once mighty frame disintegrating into the void of space. The escape pod shuddered as it was ejected from the dying ship, hurtling away from the destruction. Joshua and Talos clung to each other, their hearts pounding as they watched the flagship's final moments. In the chaos of their escape, Joshua's thoughts turned to the future. The quantum destabilizer was gone, and with it, the threat it posed to the galaxy. But the scars it left behind, both physical and mental, would take time to heal. As the escape pod drifted through the stars, Joshua knew that his mission was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new enemies to confront. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of relief, grateful for the friendship and loyalty of those who fought beside him. The pod's communication system crackled to life, and Admiral Vola's voice filled the cabin. "Attention all survivors. We are setting course for the nearest Ledosian outpost. There, we will regroup and assess the situation. Joshua leaned back against the wall of the pod, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Talos sat beside him, his hand resting on Joshua's shoulder in a gesture of silent support. Together, they faced the uncertainty of the future, knowing that whatever lay ahead they would face it as allies, united by the bonds forged in the heat of battle and the depths of shared trauma. As the escape pod hurtled away from the crumbling remains of the Ledosian flagship, Joshua and Talos watched in stunned silence as the once mighty Ledosian fleet drifted aimlessly through the void. The ships, their crews no longer under the influence of the quantum destabilizer, seemed lost and directionless, like puppets with their strings suddenly cut. Inside the cramped confines of the pod, Joshua and Talos slumped against the walls, their bodies aching from the ordeal they had just endured. The adrenaline that had sustained them through the chaos was now fading, leaving them exhausted and drained. Joshua ran a hand over his face, his mind reeling from the implications of their discovery. "The progenitors," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "An entire race that we never knew existed, and they left behind a legacy of horror." Talos nodded grimly, his eyes fixed on the debris field that had once been his people's greatest warship. "The quantum destabilizer was just the beginning," he said. "Who knows what other nightmares the progenitors might have created?" As they spoke, Joshua noticed that the escape pod's communication system was flashing an error message. He moved to the console, his fingers flying over the keys as he attempted to diagnose the problem. "Damn it," he cursed under his breath. "The system's fried. We can't contact the Resilience or any of the other Ledosian ships." Talos joined him at the console, his brow furrowed as he examined the readouts. "Let me take a look," he said. "I might be able to jury-rig a repair." As Talos worked, Joshua's thoughts turned to the future. The knowledge of the progenitors and their terrifying creation would change everything. How would the Ledosians react when they learned the truth? And what about Earth? The implications were staggering. Suddenly a shrill alarm pierced the silence of the pod. Joshua's eyes widened as he saw the sensor readings. "Talos, are you seeing this?" The Ledosian looked up from his work, his expression one of surprise and concern. "An energy reading coming from the debris field. But how is that possible?" Joshua felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered his experience within the quantum destabilizer, the nightmarish landscape, the twisted consciousness that had sought to consume him. Could it be? "We have to investigate," he said, his voice tight with tension. "If there's even a chance that something survived the destruction of the device—" Talos hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed, but we must be cautious. We don't know what we're dealing with." With a few deft keystrokes, Talos maneuvered the escape pod closer to the source of the energy reading. As they approached, Joshua's heart began to pound in his chest. There, amidst the twisted metal and shattered fragments of the flagship, was a small, pulsating orb. It glowed with an eerie, sickly light, and Joshua could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Joshua nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "A remnant of the quantum destabilizer's core, and there's something inside it." As he spoke, Joshua felt a presence brush against his mind. It was weak, barely coherent, but he recognized it instantly. The fragmented consciousness of one of the trapped souls, pleading for help. Joshua's hand trembled as he reached out, his fingers hovering over the console. He knew that he should destroy the orb, to ensure that the horror of the quantum destabilizer could never be unleashed again. But the thought of leaving a sentient being trapped in that nightmare forever, it was almost too much to bear. Talos sensed his friend's hesitation and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Joshua, I understand your desire to help, but we must be careful. We don't know what extracting that consciousness could do, or what kind of entity it might be." Talos nodded, his expression grim. "Very well. I will study the orb, see if there's a way to safely remove the consciousness without risking another catastrophe. But Joshua, we must be prepared for the worst." As they debated their course of action, Neither Joshua nor Talos noticed the cloaked ship that lurked nearby, hidden from their sensors. On board, the enigmatic progenitors watched the unfolding events with keen interest. "The human has exceeded our expectations," one of them said, its voice a metallic whisper. "To have defeated the quantum destabilizer entity, it is most impressive." Another progenitor, its form shrouded in shadows, leaned forward. "Indeed, and now with the discovery of the remnant orb, a new opportunity presents itself." The first progenitor turned to its companion, its eyes glinting with a cold, calculating light. "The human and the Ledosian, they may prove useful in our plans. We must continue to observe and to manipulate events as necessary." As the progenitors plotted and schemed, Joshua and Talos continued their desperate efforts to unravel the mystery of the orb and the trapped consciousness within. Little did they know that their actions were being guided by an unseen hand, and that the true nature of the threat they faced was far greater than they could possibly imagine. As Joshua and Talos stared at the pulsating orb, its eerie light casting flickering shadows across the escape pod's interior, a sudden tremor shook the tiny craft. The two men exchanged a look of alarm, their hearts racing as they realized that something was very wrong. Without warning, a blinding beam of energy engulfed the pod, bathing it in an otherworldly glow. Joshua and Talos shielded their eyes, their skin tingling as the strange force pulled them upward, the pod shuddering as it was drawn inexorably towards an unknown destination. As the light faded, Joshua and Talos found themselves standing in a vast, dimly lit chamber, the walls pulsing with alien technology. Before them stood the progenitors, their luminescent skin and silver eyes gleaming in the darkness. The beings radiated an aura of ancient power, their presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "Joshua Simpson and Talos of the Ledosian Resistance," a voice echoed in their minds, the words bypassing their ears and resonating directly in their thoughts. "We have been observing your actions closely, and we have come to a decision regarding the fate of the orb you possess." Joshua stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed the enigmatic beings. "What do you want with it? Who are you?" The progenitor's eyes glowed brighter, their telepathic voice taking on a tone of grave importance. "We are the creators of the device you know as the quantum destabilizer. The consciousness within the orb is not a mere fragment, but a failsafe designed to prevent the misuse of our technology." Talos, his eyes wide with realization, spoke up. "You mean there are more of these devices out there?" The progenitors nodded, their movements fluid and graceful. "In our quest for immortality, we created many such devices, each with its own guardian consciousness. But we soon realized the danger they posed, and we have been tracking them down, retrieving the guardians to prevent further catastrophes." As the progenitors moved towards the orb, their hands outstretched, Joshua felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to touch it. Before anyone could stop him, he lunged forward, his fingers grazing the orb's surface. In an instant, Joshua's mind was flooded with a barrage of images and sensations. He saw countless worlds, each one bearing the scars of the progenitor's ancient mistakes. He felt the pain and sorrow of the guardian consciousnesses, their silent vigil a testament to the heavy burden they bore. Joshua staggered back, his mind reeling from the onslaught of information. He felt his knees buckle, his vision blurring as he struggled to process the magnitude of what he had just experienced. Talos rushed to his friend's side, his hands gripping Joshua's shoulders as he tried to steady him. But before he could reach Joshua, the progenitors intervened, their telepathic voice ringing with a tone of warning. "Joshua Simpson, your actions have set in motion a chain of events that cannot be undone. The knowledge you now possess carries a heavy responsibility, one that will forever change the course of your life and the lives of those around you." As Joshua slipped into unconsciousness, his mind overwhelmed by the weight of the progenitor's revelations, Talos could only watch helplessly as the ancient beings retrieved the orb, their mission complete. The progenitors, their luminescent forms fading into the shadows, departed as silently as they had arrived, leaving Talos alone with the unconscious Joshua. As the escape pod drifted through the endless expanse of space, Talos sat beside his friend, his thoughts racing as he pondered the implications of their encounter. The progenitor's warnings echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the heavy burden that Joshua now bore, the knowledge of an ancient civilization's mistakes, the responsibility to ensure that they were never repeated. These were the challenges that lay ahead, the secrets that would shape their future in a galaxy full of hidden dangers and untold mysteries. Talos looked out into the void, the stars cold and distant, and he shivered, a sense of foreboding washing over him. The path before them was uncertain, the consequences of their actions yet to be revealed. But one thing was clear: their lives and the fate of the galaxy itself would never be the same again. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.